everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and today I'm going to be doing a weird version of If You Like This, Read This, where I'm going to be talking about romance books you should read if you like certain thriller or horror books. This idea actually came from one of my subscribers who was on one of my reading sprint sessions, and they suggested that I do this video when I was talking about wanting to do some sort of romance recommendations video, and it was just too funny to pass up. I had to figure out a way to make it happen. So this is gonna be a little bit of a sillier video today. It's not the best If You Like This, Read This type of recommendation video that I usually do, but it was just such a fun idea that I wanted to see it through and see what I could make happen. So I've got a couple recommendations today. Just bear with me, just sit back, have a fun time, grab a drink or a snack or something, and let's get into this. So my first If You Like This, Read This recommendation that I could come up with that is actually not a terrible pairing is if you like Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins, then I think you should read Shipped by Angie Hockman. Reckless Girls is a thriller book that is about this group of people who end up on this island together and they all start making bad decisions together. People end up dead, basically. It's a more steamy thriller. There's a lot of like romantic tension between people, but it's set out on this isolated island where they're really far removed from other people. There's a lot of creepy things going on with the island because it has this weird history where there was a shipwreck there and, you know, all these crazy other things going on. But Shipped is a romance book that is also set on an island. This is set at the Galapagos Islands, and this is a story about these two co-workers who are both up for a promotion. In order to get the promotion, they have to pitch this marketing idea for these cruises that their company does, and so they're both being sent on this cruise together in the Galapagos Islands and trying to come up with some kind of marketing idea for it. Since they are pitted against each other and for other reasons, they are enemies, and it is an enemies to lovers style romance that is set out on this island. So if you liked the island backdrop of Reckless Girls and you're looking for an island romance, I would definitely recommend Shipped to you. Next up is another one that's not a terrible pairing either. This one I've got a couple books that I would pair together and say if you liked those books, then read this one. The thriller and horror books that I am pairing together in this include Frankenstein, The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, and Down Among the Sticks and Bones. If you like those books and the vibes of those books, then I would recommend that you check out Anatomy, A Love Story by Dana Schwartz. This is a book that I just recently read. I have a whole dedicated reading vlog to reading this book, and I actually talk about these pairings in that vlog as well, so this was top of mind for me. Anatomy is a gothic romance that has some horror elements. It's a YA, it's got a coming of age tale to it. It's really a blend of a lot of different things, and it's not a front-facing romance. So I think this is actually a pretty good recommendation for if you like the creepy things with gothic stories and Frankenstein, then I think you would like Anatomy. Anatomy is a story about this young woman who is really interested in becoming a surgeon, but in her world, back in historical times, there is really no possibility for a woman to become a surgeon, but she's super determined. She ends up attending these courses. She ends up getting kicked out of the courses because she's a woman. And so then she ends up meeting this guy, Jack, who digs up corpses and sells them to people who are doing medical training for a living. So they become a great pair together since he can dig up the corpses that she can study on, and he's also supporting her wishes to try to be a surgeon in the future. The story is not fully like their love story. There's definitely a romance element there. They have a love story in the story as well, but you're really following Hazel throughout the story and her coming of age journey and really just her fighting to get what she wants in life. So it's a really great book for people who really like strong-willed female protagonists, but it's got all the spooky gothic things in it as well, with the corpses being dug up. There's a mystery going through the story as well. There's tons of organs in the book. Just has a really cool atmosphere and aesthetic to it as well. So if you like those types of gothic stories, I would definitely recommend this one. I've also heard it's good for people who like The Picture of Dorian Gray, which I have not read, but also we'll throw that one in there as well. This is where things are going to start getting a little bit out of hand because those were the only two like solid ideas that I had for thriller slash horror to romance recommendations. So from here, it's going to be an adventure. First up, we have if you liked The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, then I would recommend One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. What in the world do these two books have in common? Time loops. I love a good story with a time loop or just a story that plays with time in general. And I find that I really enjoy that across genres. So it doesn't really matter to me if I'm reading a romance or a thriller or a horror or a sci-fi or an action book. I really enjoy stuff that plays with time in interesting ways. So I think if you like the way that The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle plays with time and how there is a time loop in that story, then you'll like what's going on in One Last Stop. So in The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, there is a murder mystery that is going on. Evelyn Hardcastle has been murdered at this party, and the protagonist that you're following lives the same day over and over again trying to figure out who killed Evelyn Hardcastle. But there's also an additional weird thing going on where that protagonist is living the day over and over through different bodies of people who were at the parties. So there's this sci-fi speculative element in the story as well, and I just love the way that time was played with in that book. In One Last Stop, you're following a romance between these two characters in New York, one of whom is stuck on the subway and stuck in time. She's actually from the 70s and she hasn't aged a day, and she's just stuck in this time loop on the subway. So the other character who meets her and starts to fall in love with her, they pair up together to try to understand things about her past and try to help her remember, because she's also forgotten everything about her identity, which is also a kind of similar element in The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And One Last Stop is you have a character who doesn't know who they are. So it's also got that mystery element weaved in as they're trying to figure out who she is and her past and why she's stuck in this time loop and why this particular time loop in general. But it's also a romance, so they're also falling in love at the same time. So I actually don't think that's too bad of a recommendation. I'm kind of proud of that one too. Next up we have, if you enjoyed The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf, then I would recommend that you check out 8 Perfect Hours by Leah Lewis. The reason I'm recommending these two together is because both of these appear to be stories that will spend a lot of the time in an isolated snowstorm setting. The Overnight Guest is a thriller book where this woman is stuck in a cabin in a snowstorm and she ends up encountering a child, and then mystery thriller things happen from there. 8 Perfect Hours is these two people who get stuck in a snowstorm together in their cars. They spend 8 perfect hours together in that snowstorm and then they fall in love. So it appears like that's going to be a large part of the story. It's not for either of them. And so I think if you could enjoy one or the other of them thinking you were getting into a snowstorm story, but then still enjoy the book, then you should check out the other one. The Overnight Guest, I feel like the snowstorm's like the smallest part of the story. There's multiple different timelines, multiple different POVs, and the snowstorm really doesn't take up a lot of it. You get a detective story that's going on for a lot of it. You've got a child's perspective that you don't know what's going on there and what kind of situation they're in. And really that snowstorm piece just doesn't make the book. And then in 8 Perfect Hours, in the beginning they get caught in a snowstorm together, but them being stuck in that snowstorm is also a very small part of the book, and it really follows what happens to them over the next year of their lives, where fate keeps bringing them back together in a serendipitous type way. And it's actually a really beautiful love story. I love that book. It was a 5-star for me. It just wasn't what I was expecting. The Overnight Guest also was not what I was expecting, and it ended up just being a 2-star for me. So I didn't really love that one. But if you can handle a little bit of deceit when it comes to what you think you're getting into, then I would recommend those two books with one another. Next up we have, if you enjoyed the book The One by John Mars, then I would recommend The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. Full honesty here, I haven't read The Soulmate Equation yet, but I do know what it's about, and it sounds like these two books would be a good pairing for one another just because of the themes that they hit on. So The One by John Mars is a sci-fi thriller story where you can be matched with your soulmate from your DNA, and there is this dating service that will do that, and it ends up causing a lot of disruption in a lot of people's lives. The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren is the same idea. You can be matched with your soulmate based on your DNA, and this woman ends up getting matched with the program's founder, and then it is a romance story from there. So if you find that concept of being paired with your soulmate based on your genetics rather than any other environmental factors interesting, and if you think your interest in that will carry across genres, then these two books sound like two great recommendations for you. Which is why I picked up The Soulmate Equation, because I really enjoyed that aspect in The One. So once I read that book, I'll let you know how I feel about it personally, but even without reading it, I think I still feel good about recommending those two together because they're so similar. And then for the last recommendation, I had to cheat a little bit and include a movie in this one. So if you enjoyed the movie The Unforgivable, which stars Sandra Bullock and is on Netflix and just came out pretty recently, then I think you'll enjoy Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. Both of these stories follow a main female character who is coming out of prison and trying to get their lives back on track. In The Unforgivable, it's more of an action story. There's a bit of a mystery weaved into the story as well, but you're watching this woman come out of prison and just face so much prejudice, which is very similar to what's happening in Reminders of Him. In Reminders of Him, you're following this main character, Kenna, who is being released from prison and trying to reconnect with her daughter, who she had right after she got put into prison. So she's never gotten to have any kind of relationship with her child, and she's trying to earn back that trust and be able to be a part of her daughter's life. It is a very heartbreaking story in typical Colleen Hoover fashion, so it's not just your fluffy romance. This is a more hard-hitting romance, which is also just primarily a contemporary fiction book with romance elements. So I think if you enjoyed seeing the journey that woman went on in The Unforgivable, that you would enjoy watching Kenna's journey as well in Reminders of Him. Okay, that is all I could come up with today. If you have any other fun ideas for thriller to romance or horror to romance recommendations, leave them in the comments down below. I racked my brain for so long trying to come up with just the few that I did, so I would definitely be interested to see if anyone else has any other ideas. I love these crazy video ideas. It was such a fun challenge to try to piece it together. So also, if you have any other fun, challenging ideas for videos you'd like to see, you can let me know down in the comments below as well. If you made it to the end of the video and you want to leave an emoji down in the comments below to let me know, or if you would just like to resort to the emoji because you don't know what else to comment, let's do the heart with the arrow in it for today's emoji. Since it is Valentine's Day, I feel like that is a nice, appropriate emoji for today's video. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!